Hey Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And before we get to our main topic, I wanted to give a little Amazon news. Last week it was announced that Amazon has renewed their Lord of the Rings series for Season 2. Which is good news. They haven't even filmed a single frame of Season 1 yet, as far as I know. And it's not that surprising, right? They dropped $1 billion on this show. I can't imagine Amazon would be like, yeah, this is a one and done. So, not a surprise, but welcome news. They are in it for the long haul. In fact, one of the interviews I read indicated that Season 1 was going to be 20 episodes long. So that in itself is it's a long season, and now we have a follow-up season as well. Awesome news. So today's topic actually originated from commenter Alex Lamond. My apologies if I have mispronounced your name, Alex. But Alex's question regarded the origin of ogres in Lord of the Rings and, their backstory. I did some research and I actually found that the answer to this question is perhaps surprisingly simple, in that the term ogre does not really show up much at all in The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion. It does show up once in The Hobbit, and I will read for you that passage that it shows up in. But as you'll see, it is being mentioned as a mythological creature. So I think the answer is that ogres are actually mythological creatures within Tolkien's mythology, a myth within a myth. It's an Inception type thing. So here you go. Here is the one mention that I could find of the word ogre in the collected works of J.R. Tolkien. And it involves the Riddles in the Dark scene. Awesome scene, obviously. Gollum, Bilbo. Gollum is about to try to break Bilbo with the perfect riddle. Then he thought the time had come to ask something hard and horrible. This is what he said. This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal, slays king, ruins town, beats high mountain down. Poor Bilbo sat in the dark, thinking of all the horrible names of all the giants and ogres he had ever heard told of in tales. But not one of them had done all these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different, and he ought to know it, but he could not think of it. Now, eventually he accidentally says the word time. That's the answer. He gets out. But as you notice, as he's thinking, he's trying to think of the horrible names of all the giants and ogres that he ever heard tale of. So again, we're hearing it in the context of, it was like a bedtime story or a fairy tale that he might have heard, and not some actual creature. And the fact that ogres just don't show up anymore after that tells me that what we consider to be an ogre is not a thing in the Lord of the Rings. That said, it's led to today's topic, trolls. Because I think the most obvious analog to an ogre would be a troll, especially like those trolls, the stone trolls, like William and Bert and Tom are three trolls in The Hobbit. Those are, feel very ogreish to me. So I thought I would do a little video on the origin and the types of trolls. Trolls have been around for a long time in Tolkien's mythology. Way back in the First Age, we've got some documentation about them. Here's a passage about the hero Hurin fighting off this giant mass of trolls, and it's a very evocative scene. Last of all, Hurin stood alone. Then he cast aside his shield and wielded an axe two-handed, and it is sung that the axe smoked in the black blood of the troll guard of Gothmog until it withered, and each time that he slew, Hurin cried, Ore Enteluva, day shall come again. 70 times he uttered that cry, but they took him at last alive, by the command of Morgoth. So we see there that the black blood of the trolls is corrosive, and he killed 70 of them with a two-handed axe. But in any case, so that's a long, long time ago, way back in the First Age, War of the Rings in the Third Age. So you've got many thousands of years that they were around. Regarding their origin, it's a really interesting conversation that we see between Treebeard and Merry and Pippin. And Treebeard references trolls. So here's that passage. "Will you really break the doors of Isengard?" asked Merry. Well, we could, you know. You do not know, perhaps, how strong we are. Maybe you have heard of trolls? They are mighty, strong. But trolls are only counterfeits, made by the enemy in the great darkness, in mockery of Ents, as orcs were of elves. We are stronger than trolls. We are made of the bones of the earth. We can split stone like the roots of trees, only quicker, far quicker, if our minds are roused. So there you go. It's a passage that Tolkien discusses in some of his letters in later years, and maybe walks us back a little bit. But here it is in black and white. It is Treebeard saying that trolls are counterfeits of the Ents. So as orcs are to elves, so are trolls to Ents. Just to reinforce that point, Tolkien, in his description of Treebeard, brings back this troll description. Here's where he is describing Treebeard. "A large knob-knuckled hand was laid on each of their shoulders, and they were twisted round gently but irresistibly. Then two great arms lifted them up. They found they were looking at a most extraordinary face. It belonged to a large, man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 foot high, very sturdy, with a tall head and hardly any neck." So we do see that the origin of trolls is this Morgoth's attempt to copy and mock Ents. Ents are creatures of the earth. Trolls, at least the original stone trolls, were creatures of stone, of the earth as well. So you can see perhaps there's a little bit of a through line there. But stone trolls, like Bill, Bert, and Tom, that were turned to stone in The Hobbit, and then we later saw their stone figures in Lord of the Rings, those are just one type of troll in Tolkien's mythology. And he described several different types. In fact, one type in particular, the Olog-hai, were kind of like super troll that he describes in the appendices of Lord of the Rings. And here's where he talks about trolls and how the Olog-hai were kind of the next step of evolution of trolls. "In their beginning, far back in the twilight of the elder days, these were creatures of dull and lumpish nature, and had no more language than beasts. But Sauron had made use of them, teaching them what little they could learn and increasing their wits with wickedness. Trolls, therefore, took such language as they could master from the orcs, and in the Westlands the stone trolls spoke a debased form of the common speech. But at the end of the Third Age, a troll race not before seen appeared in southern Mirkwood and in the mountain borders of Mordor. Olog-hai they were called in the black speech. That Sauron bred them none doubted, though from what stock was not known. Some held that they were not trolls, but giant orcs. But the Olog-hai were in fashion of body and mind quite unlike even the largest of orc kind, whom they far surpassed in size and power. Trolls they were, but filled with the evil will of their master. A fell race, strong, agile, fierce, and cunning, but harder than stone. Unlike the older race of the twilight, they could endure the sun, so long as the will of Sauron held sway over them. They spoke little, and the only tongue that they knew was the black speech of Barad-dûr. All right, so these are trolls that are larger than stone trolls. They can withstand the sun. They're not going to turn to stone as soon as the sun hits them. They have the power of speech. I think this would be the best model for what we would consider an ogre in common parlance, would be this Oleg High. Super troll that Sauron created. However, there are other types of trolls as well. What I'll do is I'm just going to read you a couple of passages that each passage names a different type of troll. So for instance, I'm going to take you back 250 years before the War of the Ring, the long winter. Helm Hammerhand and his people are trapped in the Hornburg, what later becomes known as Helm's Deep. They're under siege. The winter has come down. There's snow everywhere. They're starving to death. Helm Hammerhand gets a certain reputation amongst the besiegers. Helm grew fierce and gaunt for famine and grief, and the dread of him alone was worth many men in the defense of the burg. He would go out by himself, clad in white, and stalk like a snow troll into the camps of his enemies, and slay many men with his hands. It was believed that if he bore no weapon would bite on him. The Dunlendings said that if he could find no food, he ate men. So there you go, a snow troll reference. That this guy who went and fought without any weapons and just beat people to death with his bare hands and potentially ate them was like a snow troll. So perhaps we have a reference there to another subgroup of troll. We also have reference to a subgroup of troll when it comes to the Battle of Pelennor Fields. So Grond, the giant battering ram, is brought forth, and there's only one type of troll that is strong enough to push it. Grond, they named it, in memory of the hammer of the underworld of old. Great beasts drew it, orcs surrounded it, and behind it walked mountain trolls to wield it. So those mountain trolls, I think we see some version of that in Peter Jackson's movies, the mountain trolls. So you've got stone trolls, Oleg High, snow trolls, mountain trolls, and now you see another type of troll during the War of the Ring. The orcs, hindered by the mires that lay before the hills, halted, poured their arrows into the defending ranks. But through them there came striding up, roaring like beasts, a great company of hill trolls out of Gorgoroth. Taller and broader than men they were, and they were clad only in close-fitting mesh of horny scales, or maybe that was their hideous hide. Like a storm they broke upon the line of men of Gondor, and beat upon helm and head and arm and shield as smiths hewing the hot-bending iron. So you can add hill trolls to the mix as well. And when we come to the battle at the Black Gate, when Aragorn and company are doing their bluff, and Frodo is in the process of having his finger bitten off, and the ring is about to be destroyed. There's a big battle going on, and it's Pippin who comes under attack by the troll chief. At Pippin's side, Baragon was stunned and overborne, and he fell. And the great troll chief that smote him down bent over him, reaching out a clutching claw. For these fell creatures would bite the throats of those that they threw down. Then Pippin stabbed upwards, and the written blade of Westerness pierced through the hide and went deep into the vitals of the troll, and his black blood came gushing out. He toppled forward and came crashing down like a falling rock, burying those beneath him. We see that their hides typically are strong enough to withstand some of the normal weapons, but that these special blades that our heroes have can penetrate their hides. So there's one more type of troll we hear about, and that is when we're in the mines of Moria. And we get this, the mines of Moria is just, it's my favorite scene in the Lord of the Rings, and for good reason. It's amazing. And the way Peter Jackson captures it in the Fellowship of the Ring is masterful. But the scene in which Boromir looks out the door, dodges the arrows, looks back, does they have a cave troll. Great scene. But the character who's actually doing that in the book is Gandalf. And I'll read you that passage right here. With a quick movement, Gandalf stepped before the narrow opening of the door and thrust forward his staff. There was a dazzling flash that lit the chamber and the passage outside. For an instant, the wizard looked out. Arrows whined and whistled down the corridor as he sprang back. "There are orcs, very many of them," he said. "Some are large and evil, Uriks of Mordor. For the moment they are hanging back, but there is something else there. A great cave troll, I think, or more than one. There is no hope of escape that way." So we have a cave troll. What happens is the cave troll puts its foot through. Boromir tries to attack it. It basically, his sword is useless against the hide of the cave troll, and it's up to Frodo with Sting to stab the troll in the foot. It retreats. We never actually see it in its entirety in the book. Obviously, there's a big fight with the cave troll in the movie. But so there you go. There's add that to our list of trolls: cave trolls, hill trolls, mountain trolls, stone trolls, snow trolls, Olog-hai. And there's even something called the trollmen, the half trolls, that are from the south, and they are enlisted in Sauron's army at the Battle of Pelennor Fields. There in the War of the Ring. So that's just a brief overview of the types and origin of trolls in Tolkien's mythology. But you know what? This brings up a question that I've always had, and so it made me do some research on this, and I thought, I'll bring it to you. The question I always had was, how did those swords, Glamdring, Orcrist, Sting, how did they end up in this troll horde with Bill, Bert, and Tom? There is no easy answer to this. In fact, what I'm about to do is I'm about to do like a fanfic. I'm going to give you an interpretation of how those blades might have ended up in this troll cave in The Hobbit. Again, there is no clear evidence of how this actually happened. But here's what we do know. I'm going to read you the passage in which Elrond is examining the blades. Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. He looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, "These are not troll make. They are old swords, very old swords, of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's horde or goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many ages ago. This, Thorin, the rune's name Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, foe hammer, that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well." "Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder?" said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. "I could not say," said Elrond, "but one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or come on the remnants of old robberies in some hold in the mountains." Okay, so we get from that, as we suspected, these weren't troll swords. These are elven blades found in this troll horde. They are from Gondolin. Gondolin was destroyed in the First Age, so thousands of years before we find them in The Hobbit. Also way far away from this point. This isn't like, oh, this troll horde is where Gondolin used to be. No. These things had to travel and time had to pass. As far as Sting goes, I don't think that blade was famous enough to have had some kind of a identifiable wielder. And Elrond is only giving the backstory to Orcrist and Glamdring. Thorin has Orcrist. Gandalf obviously uses Glamdring to good effect. He mentions that Orcrist was a famous blade in Gondolin, and that the king of Gondolin once used Glamdring. Now, what's interesting about that is the king of Gondolin was Turgon. Turgon is Elrond's great-grandfather. So when he's saying the king of Gondolin once wore this, he's talking about his own kin. He could have actually claimed the sword probably for his own to say, hey, look, this is a family heirloom. Mine now. Away you. He didn't. So that places, our provenance on Glamdring. Turgon wielded it. Turgon died during the fall of Gondolin in the Square of the King. The Tower of the King fell on him in the King's Square. Orcrist, we kind of have to guess a little bit about who might have wielded Orcrist, but it's present until the fall of Gondolin as well. We can surmise it's almost like a sister blade, perhaps, that it was wielded by someone of a very important person in the defense of Gondolin. The most likely people of note that were defending Gondolin during the fall would have been people like Turgon's son, Tor. But Tor used an axe, Dremberleg. That was his weapon of choice. I would think if he got a blade from his dad, that would be his weapon of choice. So I'm going to say Tor was not the wielder of Orcrist. Could have been Maeglin. Maeglin was a head of one of the houses. He's the one who actually, unfortunately, gave away the whereabouts of Gondolin, betrayed them, but until that moment was a trusted soldier in the ranks under Turgon. But he had Angurel, black sword carved from a meteorite. It's one of the most powerful swords. You could argue one of the most powerful swords in Tolkien's mythology. So no, he didn't. He wasn't wielding Orcrist. He had his own kick-axe blade. So it's not Maeglin. Could have been Glorfindel. We've talked. Glorfindel's come up in a couple of videos already here, and we don't really know what Glorfindel's blade was necessarily. However, something tells me that Orcrist was not his sword. First of all, he didn't die in the defense of the city. It was later on the road. He was fought a Balrog and fell off the side of a cliff, and his body was borne up by eagles. Might have been tougher to retrieve that sword if it indeed was his. The other reason I think it's not Glorfindel's sword is that Glorfindel is likely at Rivendell at the time of The Hobbit. So when Elrond is looking at these blades, in like the next room is probably Glorfindel having a drink. So it would be kind of mean for Elrond to be like, oh yeah, no, it's the famous sword, Orcrist. Wow, thousands of years ago at the fall of Gondolin, it was wielded by some heroes. The hero who was wielding this sword, he's right over there, but here, take it. Bye. Like, no, seems odd that if that was the case. So I'm going to say that Glorfindel was not the wielder of Orcrist. And that leaves, there's a couple of different folks it could be, but the main remaining candidate would be Ecthelion. Ecthelion of the Fountain. He's a great elf. He was there at the fall of Gondolin. He was also in the square, the King's Square. There is the Fountain of the King is where he met his end. He drowned while killing Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs. In that fight with Gothmog, he lost his sword. The sword is nameless, but let's call it Orcrist. Dropped it in the square, and then used his helmet basically to propel himself at Gothmog. The two of them fell into the fountain and drowned. So what that means is you've got Ecthelion and Turgon both have died, and their blades are lying somewhere in the rubble in this very small area. They're very close to each other in the Square of the King. There is another individual that was at the fall of Gondolin. Doesn't get a lot of talk, but he was definitely there. The history says he was at the fall of Gondolin and he escaped. And that is Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor is Feanor's grandson. He is the second greatest elven smith of all time. He's the one who creates the 3 elven rings. He's got a big part to play after the First Age. But in the First Age, he was in Gondolin. Gondolin fell. He got out of Dodge. I would just think that someone who is an elven smith, he's very passionate about smithing. He might be one who, as he's, let's say, stepping gingerly across the rubble of the Square of the King, he might see elven blades of incredible mastery and art and feel inclined to pick them up and take them with him. So I'm going to guess that perhaps Celebrimbor is the one who rescued these blades on his way out of town and kept them. Flash forward to the Second Age, when Sauron finally makes the One Ring, announces himself as Sauron. One of the first people he attacks is Celebrimbor at his kingdom of Eregion. In fact, Eregion is overrun by Sauron's forces. Orcs just ransack the city. I would propose that perhaps in that moment is when the various swords here, Glamdring, Orcrist, Sting, get looted by rampaging orcs of Sauron. They take those goods with them. While this ransacking is happening, Elrond is coming with an army from Lindon, and the dwarves attack from Moria and, do some harm to Sauron. He, in retaliation, sends orcs north to basically harass dwarves wherever they can find them. And there are dwarves at Gundabad. Gundabad is way up north, the top of the Misty Mountains. And so the orcs go to Gundabad, take it over, and then they're constantly taking control of Gundabad, losing it, taking control, and that kind of thing, back and forth. But it's during that time that up in that region, you have a whole bunch of orcs who perhaps would have taken their spoils. That area is, we're getting closer to this troll horde area from the Hobbit. And it's interesting, actually, that in the Hobbit, the great goblin that they meet up with recognizes Orcrist and Glamdring, calls them by name, knows them by sight, as does his followers. And so they've at some time, they've either laid eyes on these weapons or on pictures of them, or they've heard some kind of legend that can spell out exactly what these weapons are. But perhaps it makes sense that they maybe did lay eyes on them, because these weapons were part of some kind of an honored horde of the orcs for a long period of time. So long that this particular great goblin, it would have been in his lifespan. So that gets us up into the Third Age. The weapons are now up in the northern ranges of the Misty Mountains. Here's what we know about our stone trolls, Bert and Bill and Tom. Gandalf talks about meeting up with some of Elrond's people and hearing tales of our 3 trolls from the Hobbit. I met 2 of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls. It was they who told me that 3 of them had come down from the mountains and settled in the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid strangers. Also, we have William, Bill, is talking to his fellow trolls, and he says, "You can't expect folk to stop here forever just to be et by you and Bert. You've et a village and a half between you since we come down from the mountains. How much more do you want?" And we also have a line from Aragorn that discusses this region a little bit, where he says, "When he returned, he was not reassuring. 'We have come too far to the north,' he said, 'and we must find some way to turn back southwards again. If we keep on as we are going, we shall get up into the Ettin Dales, far north of Rivendell. That is troll country, and little known to me.'" So the Ettin Dales is a region fairly close to Gundabad. And it's kind of between Gundabad and the area where this troll horde is, which is called the Trollshaws. The Trollshaws used to be a part of an area called Rhudaur. Rhudaur was one of the 3 regions of Arnor way back in the day. And Rhudaur is translated as, wait for it, Trollshaws. A shaw is like a thicket, a small forest. So the Trollshaws are where we find our weapons. North of that are these Ettin Dales. And I would argue that perhaps our troll horde was somewhere in the region where the Ettin Dales meet up with the mountains in the Gundabad region. And our troll friends looted it from the orcs in that moment. Little interesting side note, when Aragorn is talking about the Ettin Dales and he says, that's troll country and little known to me, that troll country is also where his grandfather, Eredor, was captured and then killed by hill trolls. Hill trolls killed off the chief of the Dunedain way back in the day. I would think he would know that history, so it's kind of interesting that he's saying that as like I don't go there. Maybe one of the reasons he doesn't go there and doesn't know it is because there's a sadness about it. This is where my grandfather was slain, and so I avoid this area. So there you go. Perhaps the sword was wielded by Ecthelion during the fall of Gondolin, picked up by Celebrimbor as he fled the falling city, held onto and brought to Eregion near the mines of Moria, sacked and taken by orcs up north, then sacked again by trolls who brought it back south to the Trollshaws, and then taken by our heroes who then used them throughout the rest of our stories. So there you go. If you have a theory for the journey of our blades, the timeline of Glamdring and Orcrist and Sting, feel free to put it in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories, your theory crafting. And since we're almost at Thanksgiving, I thought I would leave you with a fun little haha. This is me as Frodo. My comedy group, Stuntmen, we did a sketch, a little parody of Lord of the Rings. I'm playing Frodo in this sketch, and you'll see as the sketch goes on why it's appropriate for Thanksgiving. So anyway, thanks everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you next time. Bye.
It's gone. It's done.
Yes, Mr. Frodo. It's done.
The best.
I can see the Shire. The Brandywine River. Bag End. Gandalf's fireworks. The lights in the body tree.
Rosie cotton dancing. She had ribbons in her hair. If I was to marry one person, it would have been her. It would have been her.
I'm so glad to be with you, Samwise Gamgee, here at the end of all things.
Wait! Mr. Frodo! We're saved!
What?